What's the most fed up New Year's Eve party you've ever been to? A few years back, at a pseudo office party thing, we rented a huge house in the mountains, and everyone was getting absolutely trashed. One guy showed up with his crazy girlfriend. She was legitimately bonkers, and had done things like fake pregnancies and miscarriages to keep him from leaving, threaten him with essay charges, that kind of thing. Everyone hated her. She drank just as much as everyone else, and alcohol cranked her behavior up several notches. She got into a big argument with another woman and started a fight. Her boyfriend tried to calm her down and made the mistake of saying, "You're acting crazy." She stormed off, then came back a few minutes later holding a kitchen knife and said, "You want to see crazy?" She then used it on herself about 7 times. The room went completely silent as we stared at her, blood soaking through her shirt, arms spread with a "yeah, what now, bish?" look on her face before she passed out. I really hope I never see anything that tops that. Story 2. I worked delivering Chinese food while I was in university, which meant I was working until 2 a.m. on New Year's Day. After my shift, I went to my buddy's house where the party was still going. My long-term girlfriend was making out with my friend. Stupid New Year's Eve. Story 3. I have 2, though one wasn't technically at the party. Here's the first. I was 19 and had been dating a girl since I was 16. Like people that age do, we thought we'd be together forever. I was her first, and recently she decided she didn't want to have only been with one person. Against my better judgment, I gave her permission to make out with a guy we were both friends with a few weeks earlier. It happened, and supposedly ended there. Complicating things, I was falling in love with his long-distance girlfriend, who didn't know about the kiss. New Year's Eve rolled around, and I was working at a banking call center until 11 p.m. I finished and rushed to the party. Everyone was already hammered. A girl was drunk, and a 21-year-old guy was trying to bang her. I pulled him off, and she yelled at me, saying she wanted to. I told them she was too drunk to consent, and that if he didn't leave her alone, I'd call the police. My girlfriend got mad at me for causing drama, and eventually I decided to go to sleep. I was asleep on the floor. She laid down next to me, and the friend laid down next to her. I woke up in the middle of the night to them making out next to me. I stayed with her for another year, and that wasn't the last time she drunkenly messed around with someone else at a party we were at together. One time, she even buried her underwear at a train track. She was not super stable. Second one. Some years later, I had just married my now wife, who is from America. I was back in Scotland to save up for the green card application and missing her. So a friend invited me to a party at a club. I was all dressed up in a full kilt. Living with my dad made saving easier. Before I left, he asked me to run to the gas station to pick up a power card, a prepaid electricity card. On the way, this huge dude asked me to buy cigarettes for him. At the time, you only had to be 16 to buy them, and he looked like a big 18-year-old to me. I knew he wasn't old enough, so I told him no. I went in, bought the card and some beer to pregame, and came back out. He confronted me, saying something like, "You think you're such a big shot to say no to me?" He started laying into me. I'm 5'4" and stocky. He was at least 6'4" and built like a brick wall. I didn't kick the shit out of him, but I held my own enough that he stopped and said, "No joke, you wait here while I go get my friends." Then he walked to his friend's house to shout at the window that they should come help him. Of course, I didn't stay. I gathered my stuff and called the police on my mobile. His friends declined to help, so he started punching me while I tried to cover my head and explain to the police what was happening. He finally realized what was going on and ran off. I got home and the police arrived to take a report. I looked down and realized my finger was pointing the wrong way. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing, so I fixed it. They took me to the hospital for a bunch of x-rays. I then spent the midnight hour alone in a hospital corridor waiting for results. The damage? My left ring finger was broken in multiple places. The top knuckle completely shattered. I also had a fractured skull and 3 cracked vertebrae. They never caught the guy. The gas station had weirdly taped over their videos, and the friends somehow never saw a thing. Story 4. First year of university, we threw a party at our apartment. The whole night was just one long series of what the F moments. One of my roommates invited a friend whose thing was doing magic tricks. He was in the middle of a pretty impressive card trick when one of my buddies responded by pulling a knife and demanding he explain how he did it, while calling him a witch. We separated them, and in exchange for not calling the cops, we took the magician to the anime rental place down the street. He bought some Pocky and seemed calmer, so we went back home. As soon as we got there, he popped some adult-themed anime into my DVD player and sat in the middle of the living room floor watching it. People got weirded out, so about half of us left to check out a bar down the street. While waiting in line, we found out one of the guys another friend had brought was 17. Everyone else got in except me and the 17-year-old. So we went to another nearby place that did not ID. We had one drink and left, then ran into our other friends who had bolted from the bar because the police showed up and they thought they were there for them. When we got back, the knife guy announced he had a vision. We were going to cross the river to get to the best party ever. So we did. The river was barely frozen, with water sitting on top in places. Everyone made it across, though I still do not know how, and thinking about it scares the crap out of me. We did find the other party, but it was mediocre. Story 5. Before I was 21, I had to pick up my mom and her boyfriend from a New Year's Eve party after work. The party was in the back hall of a bar they frequented, with all the regulars. I got there around 11:30, planning to hang out for a bit, watch the ball drop, then drive their drunk selves home. We were about 50 people, watching the countdown on a TV in the corner. Right as everyone was about to shout Happy New Year, we heard a blood-curdling scream. I turned around and saw blood everywhere, spattered across the linoleum floor. One of my mom's best friends, let's call her Tommy, was on the ground with blood pouring from her neck. One of the other partygoers, let's call him Bill, had come up behind her as the clock struck midnight and attacked her. People were screaming and panicking. Tommy's boyfriend went into such a state that several guys had to hold him down to stop him from attacking Bill. Others grabbed Tammy, dragged her against a wall, and applied pressure to stop the bleeding. 911 was called. Outside the bar, Bill sat on a bench in the parking lot and hurt himself too, twice. Apparently, Bill had been interested in Tammy, and when she repeatedly rejected him, he decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Both survived, luckily. Bill was really bad at using knife and didn't hit any major arteries. He's in jail for life now. Story 6. The entire party ended up being held hostage by a local gang who had hosted it at a member's house. A chandelier broke and no one fessed up. So guns came out, and they started threatening everyone to come up with the money to replace it before the guy's mom got home. The phrase, "We are not afraid to punch a bish," was muttered way too much for comfort. Bonus. A friend of mine was getting hit on hard by this guy, and said she didn't like it. I told him politely to back off, and she thanked me. Then the dude tried with me. She saw it, got jealous for some reason, and after we left the party, it was all jokes about my new man. A few days later, she was with him. Story 7. Ever been in a fist fight with a pit bull? There used to be a place where we partied during and shortly after high school. The guy renting it was about 5 years older than most of us and shared a lot of mutual friends. The parties were always fine, but nothing too spectacular. At some point, he adopted a pit bull who seemed extremely docile. We all loved the dog, and he appeared to like all of us. One night, a scuffle broke out between a guy nobody really liked and me. While I was trying to defend myself, the dog, ran up and latched onto my leg. I have been around dogs my entire life, and this was not a "I want to play too" bite. It was very much a "get the hell off him" bite. The other guy let go and walked away like nothing had happened, while I hit the dog over the head until it finally released me. After that, every time I went to a party there, I avoided the dog like the plague. The owner had threatened to never invite me back if I ever struck his dog again, and he only listened to the other guy's side of the story. That made me look like the aggressor, not just to him, but apparently to the dog as well. When New Year's Eve rolled around, of course we were going to this place, since it was supposed to be the biggest party in the area with around 100 people. As soon as we arrived, my first thought was to avoid the dog at all costs. We got out of the car and started walking up the driveway when the dog ran over. He was thrilled to see everyone else, tail wagging, jumping around, until he noticed me. His jowls pulled back, he stiffened up, and started growling. Then he moved closer and began barking aggressively. I was genuinely scared. I had no interest in messing with this dog, and I still had no idea why it had decided I was the aggressor. As he got closer, he opened his mouth mid-bark, and I flicked my cigarette butt into it. There was a quick yelp, and he scurried away. End of story, right? Nope. As the night went on, everyone was having a great time. People were getting drunk, the music was good, hookups were happening, and the dog left me alone the entire night. Eventually, the party moved outside to the fire pit to start a bonfire. Thinking it was a great idea, I followed everyone out. As we got the fire going, the dog came out from wherever it had been hiding and started making its rounds from person to person. Eventually, it reached me and got belligerent again. This time, I understood why the dog was upset, but I didn't care. It kept barking and snarling, showing its teeth and acting extremely aggressive. I got the owner's attention and told him that his dog was on edge. "He just doesn't like you," was his exact response. I asked if he could maybe put the dog inside or tie him up, and he flat out refused, saying, He hasn't done anything wrong. By that point, the dog was clearly sizing me up and looked ready to pounce, so I was on edge too. I decided to head back inside and slowly started backing away when the dog chose that moment to strike. He lunged, and I reacted by kicking him square in the nose. He was stunned, but I didn't let up. I kicked him again and he stepped back. I decided that was my chance to neutralize the situation, so I tackled him. I ended up on top of the dog with him on his stomach, still struggling and trying to get at me. Feeling like I had no other option, I threw a few punches to keep him down. That's when the owner ran over, shoved me off, grabbed the dog by its collar, and started screaming at me, unable to understand why I would attack his dog. Luckily, other people stepped in and backed up my side of what had happened, and the owner eventually apologized. I never went back after that. The dog was later put down after repeatedly killing sheep in the area. Before anyone crucifies me, I want to say that I love animals. I do my best to care for them and respect them. To this day, I believe that dog never should have been adopted and likely had aggressive behavior that was ignored by the owner. Story 8. I was in my early 20s and had been dating this guy for a few weeks. He'd just asked me to be his girlfriend earlier that night, but we hadn't had our first kiss yet. I thought it would be romantic to have our first kiss at midnight on New Year's Eve. We were at a party full of keg stands and beer pong. Not too strange since we were around 21 or 22. Though I had already graduated and he'd never been to college, so we weren't really college kids. Shortly before midnight, his friend dared him to do 6 shots of Everclear. He ended up vomiting his entire stomach into the kitchen sink. Then at midnight, he tried to kiss me. To reiterate, our first ever kiss, and he tasted like Everclear and vomit. I protested a little, but let him give me a quick peck out of some misguided sense of sentimentality. Our wonderful relationship lasted until Valentine's Day, when he dumped me via text from his friend's phone, saying he felt nothing for me except slight affection and extreme lust. I had knitted him a scarf, which I ended up giving to a friend. Honestly, I can't remember what I was thinking dating that guy for even 2 months. I'm just glad I have a nice, normal, mature boyfriend now. Story 9. Sort of messed up. My dad was genuinely paranoid about Y2K. He bought into conspiracy theories and also believed Jesus was about to return. He was convinced that 2 things would happen after midnight on January 1st, 2000. Civilization as we knew it would collapse, and if we did not get raptured, Christians would be purged before Jesus returned. My dad had help from a friend of ours who was somewhat educated, a city planner, but also kind of unhinged. Together, they stocked up on food, water, and weapons, and even set up safe houses we could fall back to. My dad also met a guy at a bar who looked like Ned Gerblansky from South Park. This guy convinced my dad he was a survivalist with top secret clearance and told us X-Files style stories. He was supposed to teach us kids guerrilla combat, but every lesson turned into him getting drunk and letting us shoot beer cans and squirrels, which he would take home and eat. This was supposedly our muscle, in case doomsday actually happened. My dad constantly told me stories about the Cuban Missile Crisis and how his parents had instructed him to take his sister and drive to Klamath Falls, Oregon, if the Russians started nuking cities. He also talked about how when the Moors invaded Spain and Portugal hundreds of years ago, they killed all the males, including boys. By the time Y2K rolled around, my dad had me, at 9 or 10 years old, convinced I was going to be killed by Moors or Russians. A few days before New Year's Eve, my dad got spooked and bought a camper van, then moved all our supplies into it. We drove out to a cabin in the woods. The city planner guy was there with his family, and the wacky veteran showed up too, claiming there was violence in American cities and people were dying everywhere. We eventually turned on the television to watch the world end. It became clear nothing was happening, but the adults kept rationalizing it, deciding the world would end after the last time zone entered the new millennium. It didn't. I remember feeling an overwhelming amount of irrational fear leading up to that night and how uneventful it turned out to be. It definitely helped shape my jaded view of people later in life. Story 10. Last year, I went to one of my best friend's New Year's Eve parties. It was mostly her closer high school friends. Around 4 a.m., people started leaving, except for one guy who was completely blacked out. We were trying to put him to bed because we didn't want him going home alone in that state. While trying to settle him, we discovered a gun under the coats on the bed. Now, I don't live in the US, so guns are really not well perceived, and honestly, everyone was panicking. The drunk guy then tries to get up and yells, "It's mine! I wanted to end you all, haha, no, it's a joke." Everyone was freaking out at that point. My friend's boyfriend grabbed the gun and hid it in a locker in the basement so the guy couldn't reach it, and I went outside to call the police. When the police arrived, it turned out to be just a replica gun, a lead gun used for LARPing. The drunk guy apologized the next morning, saying it wasn't his, and that one of the other guests had forgotten to return it to someone for a LARP event. Story 11. Back in my wilder days, I went to a friend's New Year's Eve party. It was packed, probably 70 to 80 people. Everyone was in their early 20s except for the host's younger sister and her friend, who were about 14. My friends were drinking and playing beer pong, and everyone was having a good time. As I was leaving the bathroom, the sister tried to push me back in. I dodged her and got the hell out of that room. Later, I found out the two girls were trying to get any guy alone to lose their V-cards. Thankfully, none of my friends were like that, and we managed to trick the two girls and lock them in their bedroom, away from the rest of the party. Story 12. In Osaka, I went to some random club. It was past midnight by then. I got charged way more than everyone else and was probably the only white guy there. I danced with a few Japanese girls and tried talking to them. They seemed interested. Then some beta-looking Japanese guy got all upset and went over to the VIP area to talk to some sketchy guys in suits and sunglasses who were hanging out with some hot women. He started making gestures toward me, and the guys stood up and looked in my direction. I took that as my cue to leave. Maybe it was nothing, and I was just paranoid from the booze. Maybe I was dancing with their girls. Most likely it was a white guy coming in and taking our girls thing. Either way, I think I would have lost a pinky if I'd stayed. Story 13. My best friend was looking for the bathroom at a banger of a house party 4 years back. He walked into a closet and the owner caught him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Looking for the bathroom," he replied. She pointed out that it was actually across the hall. He went to the bathroom and broke the seal. Later in the evening, after many hours of heavy drinking, my friend returned to the closet and pissed all over the clothes and shoes inside. Another friend at the same party plunged his fist into the cake and started eating it off his hands before picking the whole thing up and smearing it all over the walls. Admittedly, when midnight struck, I popped my champagne and sprayed it all over the ceiling and the living room couch. Story 14. Whatever year, I was 19. I went to a co-worker's New Year's Eve party. There were lots of people from work there, including a guy I absolutely hated. After we all got too drunk too fast, he and I got into it. Being the drunk shit show I was, I grabbed a kitchen knife and threatened to stab him. The host's boyfriend, who happened to be the a-hole's best friend, wrestled the knife away from me, leaving him with a large gash across his palm. So yeah, I'm the most screwed up thing I've ever seen at a New Year's Eve party. Story 15. There was a girl I really wanted to get together with in high school, but she was kind of a bitch. She knew I liked her, used me as a safety, and decided to invite me to Chico for a party to get drunk and finally give it up. I was drunk. She was drunk, and it was going to be sloppy New Year's Eve banging, and that was all there was to it. College was supposed to be an awesome time. We were making out on the couch for a while. I came back with 2 bottles of Fat Tire, and she was zonked the F out. God damn it. 2 bottles and blue balls for me. Yay. I threw a blanket over her and watched TV. Eventually, everyone else wandered off to their rooms to pass out. While I was watching 3 a.m. videos on MTV and trying to rehydrate so I wouldn't be completely worthless the next day, I heard what sounded like someone moving furniture in another room. Then I smelled it. I peeled back the blanket. She had crapped herself in her sleep. Not pants, shorts. And they were leaking all over the couch. We never did bang. Story 16. This was back in 2015, I think. The town my parents live in has a ferry to the next city, so every year people gather at the local pubs and then head to the ferry terminal to count down to midnight. That year, we noticed a lot of helicopters in the air, which was unusual, but the party was in full swing, so we just waved. 3 days later, my stepdad was called by the police. A kid he worked with had jumped off one of the ferries on a dare, trying to swim to the other side. He was sucked underneath. My stepdad was asked to help identify the body when it resurfaced later. We had been about 50 meters from where that kid was drowning and had no idea it was happening. Story 17. Last year at a New Year's Eve party, a group of us were standing out on a balcony when someone busted out some fireworks. I lit one and stupidly waited until it was about to go off before throwing it over the balcony. It was a perfect throw, with the fireworks shooting straight up into the air. Another guy tried it afterward. Instead of flying up and exploding, the firework landed between my legs, burning my socks and my feet. Story 18. I did not witness it myself, but it was probably more funny than messed up. I had 2 roommates who were notorious for acting out when drunk. At some point, they both decided in unison that it was a good idea to just piss themselves on the spot. Later that night, they took off their trousers and put them in the oven to dry. It was not their house. Story 19. I was at a small chill party with some friends. One friend, who had recently been dealing with some mental health issues, got super drunk and insisted on leaving. We hid everyone's keys so he could not drive, but he decided to walk instead. This was Michigan. It was about 10 degrees outside, and he lived 5 miles away. I had not been drinking, so I got in my car to look for him. When I found him walking down the road, he dove over a snowbank and straight into a ditch. He did not freeze and eventually made it home that night, but it completely ruined the night for me and the rest of us. Story 20. It is not as bad as some of the stories here, but last year my best friend had a party at her house. I have never been one to go crazy on New Year's Eve, but since this was my first real New Year's Eve party, I got pretty liquored up and wanted to find someone to kiss at midnight. I ended up talking to one of my old coworker's friends, who we will call Jay. He went in for a kiss, and suddenly it felt like I was being kissed by a lion. It was all teeth. My lips were bruised the next day. In the middle of this, another drunken coworker of mine, an older guy in his 40s who we will call G, stumbled over and started lecturing Jay about how much he cared about me and how Jay had better not hurt me. After dealing with that embarrassment, Jay somehow convinced me to go into another room. He continued attacking me with his teeth and then tried to essay me, which is when I finally noped out and went back to my friends. Once I found them, I learned that G was so wasted, he had bitten my best friend's boob right in front of her boyfriend. It was a bizarre night, to say the least. Story 21. A young lady I was into made out with my sister. Exactly 364 days ago, almost to the hour, I went home. I stopped talking to her. And about 3 months later, she wanted us to keep being friends. I told her, pretty bluntly, you knew I wanted to bang you, and you made out with my sister. What do you want from me? We are just friends now. You live, you learn. Story 22. A guy I was seeing at the time polished off a large pizza, an order of wings, and half a bottle of champagne at my apartment while we were celebrating. Later that night, the pizza and champagne decided to disagree. He got out of bed, drunk and still 3/4 asleep, to go to the bathroom and throw up. My closet and bathroom are right next to each other and look almost identical when the doors are closed. He opened the wrong door and projectile vomited all over my entire wardrobe. I wrestled him into the bathroom, still drunk myself but sobering fast, and he vomited more straight into the bathtub. I was up from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., disinfecting everything and doing laundry. He didn't help at all and went straight back to sleep like nothing had happened. He didn't even offer to pay for dry cleaning my work clothes the next morning. I broke up with him a month later during the Super Bowl. Story 23. Not nearly as screwed up as most stories here, but it's always known as the night I puked chicken wings. It was the first and only time I had real moonshine, and also the only time I've ever blacked out. I woke up and didn't recognize the clothes I was wearing. Once I stood up, I saw my townhouse walls painted red with vomit, and there was a chicken bone in the middle of it. I went to my actual room and saw more red puke on the walls on the way to my bathroom. Mind you, there was a bathroom in the room I left, but in my drunken stupor, I wanted to go to my bathroom instead. Some other friends had slept there, so I ended up painting 2 walls and cleaning the carpet in 2 rooms. Apparently, the friends with me saw me puke up the chicken bone. The Domino's guy wouldn't try to light the moonshine on fire with me on the sidewalk, which broke my heart. I also apparently saw some titties while sitting in my fishing boat. I always remember seeing titties, but not that night. And I think I lost my virginity that night with my girlfriend. They were all too nice to tell me. It actually happened a few days later when I recovered. Story 24. Pretty tame, but I was at a New Year's Eve event in Vancouver around 2004. The event involved buses taking people from club to club. The buses were late. People ended up waiting in a parking lot for several hours, and 4 girls got hypothermia. It was a mess in other ways too. We were supposed to skip lines and get a drink immediately at each club, but after the second bar, we had to wait in line, and the special drink service never happened. We bailed and just went to someone's apartment, where we had a perfectly fine party, never letting myself get roped into some gimmicky event again. Story 25. I threw a party at my apartment when I was in my early 20s. Naturally, I was getting a blowy on the toilet from one of the attendees. I was drunk, so it took a while to finish, which is important because it was the only toilet in my apartment, and there were 30 to 40 really drunk people there. Somehow, during that time, someone managed to puke on my couch and bed when they couldn't get into the bathroom. I didn't find out about either until I sat in it. Story 26. I watched a drunk woman attempt to flip on a trampoline and slam her knee into her own eye socket. When a friend and I carried her into the house, she kept asking who had punched her. It later turned out she had fractured her eye socket in 8 places and needed reconstructive surgery. She never seemed to fully believe that she had done that to herself. Story 27. I lit a few candles in memory of a friend I lost and out of pity for a miscarriage as well. My mother proceeded to give me grief about the candles, forgetting that one was for her child. I ended up missing the New Year's fireworks display because being harassed like that over and over put me completely out of the mood. Story 28. I was banging with an 18-year-old at a party when there were noise complaints. Suddenly, I realized a police officer was standing in the open bedroom doorway watching. I got up and they led me out to talk. They spoke with her for about an hour before coming out. She had initiated, but the fear of accusations was very real. I never heard from or saw her again. Thank God. Story 29. 2 years ago, at my sister's house party, my beer pong partner and I ran the table for 12 straight games. During the final game, one of our opponents started trash talking and got mad when we won. After the game, we went to shake hands, and the guy took a big step forward and kicked me as hard as he could in the jewels. Pretty much set the tone for 2016. Story 30. I was at a rooftop New Year's Eve party at a Las Vegas hotel on December 31st, 2001. Of course, 9/11 was still fresh in everyone's mind. Near midnight, there was a huge boom, and the entire hotel and some nearby buildings lost power. People freaked out. Most of us fled by walking down 51 flights of stairs in pitch dark, using only our cell phone screens for light. It turned out to be a transformer explosion. Story 31. I went with a friend to a party at her friend's house. The hostess and her boyfriend got into a fight, which ended with him pulling a knife on her. I tried to call the cops, but he used the knife to cut the phone line, essentially, holding us captive for an hour until she calmed him down and we were able to leave. This was all before cell phones, so we drove around until we found a payphone to call the cops. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. Thankfully, she was unharmed, though rattled. We convinced her to stay at my friend's house for the rest of the night, but she ended up going back to him. Story 32. Party hopping one New Year's Eve. My buddy was trying way too hard to hook up with a mutual friend and booked a limo for all of us for the night. While driving between parties, we saw a guy on the street who we were certain was a famous musician. He looked just like him and even responded when we called out his stage name. We got to chatting and found out he was actually heading to the same party. We offered him a ride, and he joined us in the limo. To make a long story short, we quickly realized he was not who we thought he was when he pulled a large handgun from his jacket. We wasted no time, asking him to exit the limo. The worst part? He stole my other friend's party mix CD, back when mix CDs were still a thing. Story 33. I was walking through the kitchen with about 15 people when a guy behind me suddenly stuck his hand inside my bra and started playing with my boob. I tried multiple times to get him to stop, both verbally and physically, but it took the friend hosting the party walking in and yelling at him to leave me alone because I was married. I tried telling my husband on the ride home, but he was so out of it he didn't remember a word I said. I had to explain everything to him again the next morning once he sobered up. Story 34. So, it's about 10 o'clock on New Year's Eve, and the party is in full swing. I'm not quite wasted, but I've had a few drinks and I'm going around doing shots with anyone who will join me. One guy initially says no, but I keep pestering him until he finally does a shot with me. Shortly after, I notice he's nowhere to be seen. Neither is the fifth of Jaeger, which I hadn't noticed. It isn't until the next morning that the conversation turns to his disappearance. It turns out, unbeknownst to me, he was a recovering alcoholic and had taken the fifth and left the party with it. Story 35. A few years back, I was in downtown Atlanta for New Year's Eve. While everyone was watching the peach drop, there was apparently a stabbing at the entrance to the metro. By the time I, along with thousands of others, needed to get on the metro, they hadn't cleaned up the blood. There were a couple of cops just moving people around the pools of blood so we could get to our trains. I didn't even know it was a stabbing until the next morning when I saw it on the news. I thought, well, that explains it. Needless to say, I'm not sure I want to brave downtown Atlanta again on New Year's Eve. Story 36. I went to a club, and everything was great until the countdown. I noticed the floor was slippery and thought it was just spilled drinks or water. Then I saw a girl puking in the corner, and it hit me. The whole floor was covered in vomit. Never again have I partied outside on New Year's Eve. Story 37. My fraternity brothers and I got invited to a New Year's Eve party at a friend's house. My night started with my pledge brother asking me to pick up a girl he wanted to hook up with and meet at his place to pregame. He started hard, downing a glass of wine, a beer or two, and most of a flask of Jim Beam. Once we got to the party, he got sucked into a game of Rage Cage while I started mingling, running into old acquaintances from as far back as elementary school. Fast forward to 10:30 and my pledge brother starts losing function. He passed out, and we had to carry him to the garage. He became borderline unresponsive, with about 5 of us taking care of him while I stayed on the phone with an EMT friend. Half of us wanted to call an ambulance, which we would have if his heart rate had slowed. Eventually, everyone left and went home. leaving me to make sure he didn't get worse. By 3 a.m., I decided he was going to be okay and slept in our friend's truck, since all the beds and couches were occupied. Needless to say, he didn't hook up with that girl. Story 38. I only went to a couple of New Year's Eve parties when I was younger, but the one I attended about 10 or 11 years ago really took the cake for screwed up. It started out fine at a friend's bar where he had $25 all-you-can-drink wristbands for the night, so we got a good start. Not too long into the night, around 9 or 10, my friend Leaf, name changed, had been pounding Southern Comfort pretty quickly. He was getting boisterous, but not terrible, though we kept a closer eye on him knowing what was coming. At 1:30 a.m., all hell broke loose. Leaf smash mode activated, and we had to get him out quickly before he destroyed anything valuable. By this point, he had already had a run-in with some Christmas lights. He started swinging between smash and depressed mode, which was especially concerning since he had lost a leg in a traumatic accident a few years prior. We managed to get him out and calm him down. The next day after he sobered up, we talked him into giving up Southern Comfort, and he was mostly well-behaved after that. That was the last New Year's Eve party I ever went to, if memory serves. Story 39. Last year, I got horrifically drunk in a pool and just floated there to avoid my brand new ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend. The host's sister yelled at me until I got out. Later, I found out everyone thought I was going to drown, and I ended up sobbing through the new year because I was so upset. My ex tried to hug me when he found me crying, so I hid beside the house to avoid everyone. This year, I'll be in Atlanta, Georgia, with my parents and sister for an international holiday. I can only hope this party is better than last year's, but honestly, I can't guarantee anything. Story 40. A guy dressed as a giant teddy bear started a fight just after the clock struck 12. Glasses flew everywhere. People rushed to move out of the way, and chaos ensued. When everything calmed down and the men were thrown out, the giant teddy bear head was left behind on the floor. Also, I once got licked on the face by a man dressed as Snow White. Fancy dress at New Year's is apparently a big thing where I live. Story 41. Not overly crazy, but we were walking around town setting off mortars. Not the deadly kind, just fireworks that launch out of a tube. We spotted some cops, and one friend went over to see if we were in trouble. Turns out they did not care about us at all, and were actually looking for a drunk guy causing problems. We decided to go to a bar, fireworks still in hand. One friend stayed outside while the rest of us went in. He joined us a bit later and said he had lit another mortar. We waited a couple of minutes and heard no explosion, so we went to check. It turned out the fuse had gone out after he dropped the shell into a cup sitting on a ledge by a window. We decided to do it properly, launched one outside the bar, and went back in. The door shut behind us right as we heard the mortar fire out of the tube. Story 42. A few years ago, we were leaving a bar and heading to one our friend ran, which he kept open past drinking hours. When we arrived, there were a few younger people there. One claimed he was security, and there was a shaved head kid who mumbled when we said hello. I assumed the shaved head kid was deaf because he didn't respond or engage with the group. About 45 minutes later, the kid, who I thought was deaf, suddenly leaped from his seat, ran through a glass door, jumped into a car, and sped away. His remaining friends, including the security guy, scrambled to cobble together a story to tell the owner. A break-in with glass on the outside of an establishment sounded exactly like something a bunch of drunks would do. Our buddy came clean to the owner, kept his job, and we never saw the guy who ran through the door again. Story 43. A friend and her young daughter were at a house party, and as is pretty normal in Australia on New Year's Eve, it was hot, and there was a pool. She had been in and out of the water all afternoon, was a little tipsy and a bit sun-affected, while her daughter was playing nearby with her sister. For some reason, she decided to jump off the second-story balcony into the pool. It was not deep enough. She broke her neck and is now a quadriplegic. Her daughter saw the whole thing and was screaming for her mom while everyone panicked. She can no longer care for herself and now lives in a group home for quadriplegic people. Her daughter grew up with her aunt, who has guardianship of her. Story 44. One year, my now boyfriend and I covered a frozen taquito with ranch dressing, grape jelly, peanut butter, and pickles, then fed it to the drunkest guy we could find at a house party. At midnight, that guy went to kiss a girl but ended up burping in her face. The smell made her throw up on the floor between them. Both of them ignored the vomit and went on to kiss a few more people. We hightailed it out of there when the homeowner slipped in the vomit coming out of his bedroom. Since then, New Year's has been a much quieter affair, and we make sure all food is properly cooked and served with appropriate toppings. Story 45. Not at a New Year's Eve party, but I was walking to my friend's house on New Year's Eve. Buses were full, and my friend didn't have bus fare, so we decided to walk toward each other, meet up, and go to his place to ring in the new year. On the way, I ran into a lot of people doing the same thing. just walking to wherever they needed to go. Everyone was really friendly, wishing me a happy new year, and I returned the greetings. The most memorable encounter was with a guy who stopped me to tell me about his night at a bar. He had been dancing with someone but didn't really know what had happened. He was clearly drunk. The walk seemed to sober him up a bit, and he started asking questions. He had lost his hat, but now had a new stain on his jeans. He explained that he had been dancing with a girl he thought was hot, but he didn't get her number. Then he noticed the stain. It was blood. Apparently, while they were dancing, she had bled on him. I wished him well on wherever he was headed next and suggested he probably should wash his pants. It was easily the most random thing I had ever encountered on New Year's Eve. Story 46. I was on a Carnival cruise in my mid-teens. Everyone on deck was completely wasted. I decided to use the restroom on the main deck. When I opened the stall, right in front of the toilet were someone's pants, completely full of crap. To this day, I can only picture some poor drunk guy stumbling around a cruise ship full of thousands of people, desperately trying to get back to his room. Story 47. Okay, first things first. Travelers in Ireland are a minority group who traditionally lived in caravans and moved around, though many have settled in recent years. They're known for being confrontational, gathering groups to target people they don't like, and generally acting like gangs. We went out as a group of about 13 and headed into our local pub. Around 11 o'clock, we left to go to the nightclub. When we got there, the doors were locked. The bouncer said it opened at 11:30, then went inside and locked the doors. Soon after, a group of travelers, about 30 people, mostly men in their early 20s, showed up. They skipped the queue, and neither they nor we got in at first, but we started chatting. It turned out there was a wedding in town, and more of the group joined. Pretty soon, it had grown to around 50 travelers along with our group. Long story short, we spent New Year's in the cold and didn't get inside until 1 o'clock. We weren't charged, but the place was stripped bare. No seating, and the bar only served 1 drink per person. It closed at 2 instead of the usual 3. We were drunk and bored, so we challenged a couple of them to a fight while waiting in line. Luckily, they didn't take us up on it, though we noticed a few others starting to size us up. To be honest, they were actually fine. I've got friends who've been mugged by local travelers. They're known for carrying knives, but the couple who hadn't skipped the queue and were talking to us were nice. It wasn't a bad night at all, and was a pretty wild way to spend my first New Year's being the legal drinking age. Story 48. 2 years ago, my friends celebrated New Year's Eve with a different group of friends. They had stronger firecrackers than allowed, imported from an Eastern European country. One guy apparently lit one, and at the same time, his phone rang. He put the cracker up to his ear instead of the phone. I've seen the pictures, and it was horrifying. His ear was almost completely destroyed, and his hand had to be heavily repaired. Story 49. I was in a really nice penthouse overlooking Austin, and when I went upstairs, I walked past the bathroom and saw a guy crawling by the toilet. I peeked in to check on him and asked if I could get him anything. He screamed, "Water and some Hot Pockets." So I took a break from my own drinking to microwave some Hot Pockets and handed them to him. He cheered and went back to leaning against the bathroom. About 2 hours later, an ambulance arrived to take him away. He had suffered pretty severe alcohol poisoning. Story 50. I had a New Year's Eve party at my house the week after my kid's dad left. My friends wanted to cheer me up, so they had my parents watch my son and invited a bunch of their friends over. It was great, like old times, until a guy whose name I can't even remember started throwing up. I've always been the mom of the group and never minded helping someone who's drunk, but this guy was different. He threw up from one end of the bathroom to the other. Every surface was covered. Then he left the house without telling anyone. I don't think I've ever been that angry while drunk. I'm usually a very happy drunk, but I was furious. Who does that and just disappears? A few hours later, I was essayed by a guy I had only met a couple of times. I only recently recovered my memory of that part of the night, so I'm still processing it. Story 51. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was celebrating New Year's Eve at a dive bar. Their resident Great Dane was chilling on his designated love seat by the bouncer's stool. He was usually super chill, loved pets, and before that night, I'd never seen him get off the couch. Being New Year's Eve in a popular bar district, the place was packed. Like, hold your drink to your chest. Everyone crammed in like sardines packed. It was also very dark, lit only by the jukebox, beer signs, and dim lighting behind the bar. When midnight rolled around, everyone had their party blowers, and we were counting down. 10, 9, 8. You know the drill. When the clock struck 12, the bar erupted with cheering, hollering, and kazoo sounds. The Great Dane had no idea what was happening. He freaked out at the sudden noise and bolted out the back door, which led to a smoking deck and then into the alley. I never saw him again that night or since. poor pup. But here's where it gets truly messed up. That huge dog, in his panic, took a massive dump right in the middle of the bar as he bolted for the door. The unsuspecting revelers had no idea at first, but within about 10 seconds, the smell hit. People scrambled, trying to get away from the stench. Given the environmental factors, pitch dark and packed way. Beyond allowable occupancy, the crowd had no clue where the pile was. They ended up tracking it everywhere, moving around like a panicked herd of animals. The smell filled the entire bar, and within 3 minutes of the ball dropping, the place was a ghost town. I'd say it's both screwed up and gross. Definitely a New Year's Eve to remember. Story 52. A few years ago, just before New Year's Eve, I was heading out to dinner with my ex and thought I felt my lip twitching. I thought about my brother, who had seizures growing up, but just shrugged it off. Dinner tasted off, but I'm generally bad at being aware of myself. I enjoyed New Year's, but over the next couple of days, I started noticing weird things, changes in taste, facial movements, etc., and mentioned them to my ex. She told me to go to the doctor. I said I would the next day, and in the meantime, I Googled symptoms online. After a bit of searching, I looked in the mirror and took some pictures of myself, closing my eyes. Only one eye would actually close, and if I smiled, it came out more like a smirk. It turned out I had slowly progressing Bell's palsy, which made it impossible to use the muscles or taste buds on the left side of my face. I went to the hospital to make sure it wasn't a stroke. Luckily, it was about 80% better within 3 months and fully recovered in 6 months. Story 53. I remember when I was working in the hotel industry, a buddy of mine told me about an old man who checked in on New Year's Eve only to die in his room. Apparently, he knew his time was near and wanted to die in luxury, so he chose the most expensive room in a very trendy London hotel. I won't disclose the name. That's what the note he left said anyway. He was found the next afternoon, completely blue. It's really sad to see someone pass away alone like that. Story 54. It wasn't really a party, just me hanging out at a friend's apartment, drinking and watching TV. His girlfriend had to work until 11 and he wasn't happy about it. I really liked her and kept telling him it was fine. She'd be there by midnight. Sure enough, she got dropped off by a friend right after 11. My friend was still pissed, and instead of being reasonable, started yelling at her. She had worked all day and wasn't in the mood for his shit, so she yelled back. The argument escalated, and at one point she shouted at me to snap out of my just sitting here staring trance, yelling, "Please take me home," before I could even respond, though I would have said yes. My friend got so angry he swung at her. She ducked, and he literally put his fist through the living room wall. In what felt like a slow-motion moment, but was really only a few seconds, I jumped up, wrapped my arms around her protectively, and we bolted out the door. Surprisingly, he didn't give chase. I took her home, with her sobbing the entire way, and dropped her off just before midnight. Realizing he was no longer my friend after that bullshit, I drove home and celebrated midnight alone in my car, replaying the domestic dispute in my head. I was, and still am, very glad he never connected that night. She thankfully broke up with him, so he not only lost me as a friend, he lost her too. Serves him right. Story 55. Not really a party, but my then girlfriend and I were celebrating New Year's Eve at my parents' place. After dinner, we were chilling in my room when she suddenly started crying. I asked her what was wrong and she said, "There's this guy in my year who told me he likes me." I told her that wasn't a problem. Just tell him she wasn't interested. She went silent for a bit, and after some coaxing, she admitted she had a crush on him. This was around 10 o'clock. I spent the rest of the night drinking, but I was so mad I didn't even feel drunk. We ended up breaking up a month or so later. I'll never understand why she didn't have the decency to tell me earlier, especially since our 3-year anniversary was on the 4th of January. What I do know is I'm incredibly glad to be rid of her, since I met a way nicer girl a couple of years later, and I'll be celebrating with her this year. Story 56. One year, we decided to go to Times Square to see the ball drop. One of the guys I was with wanted to stop at a goth club he'd heard about. About 15 minutes after we got there, someone released some kind of chemical into the air. Everyone started coughing. Our eyes were burning, and we had to get out. We walked to Times Square, but we were about 5 minutes late, and the cops were already clearing everyone out. In the huge mass of people leaving, I ran into my friend. He was with a guy I didn't know who was really drunk. We decided to just go home, so we ended up back in Hoboken walking down River Street. The guy started smashing windows of parked cars. Eventually, the cops showed up, and he was screaming, "Screw the police!" My friend argued with them, and they told us to just take the guy home. Story 57. A coworker's brother started peeing all over a pool table. He was already drunk by the time he, my coworker, a few other coworkers, and their family members showed up at the bar where my housemates My cousin, his wife, and my girlfriend and I were hanging out. Without hesitation, he just pulled out his junk and started urinating all over one of the bar's pool tables. Story 58. Last year, New Year's Eve 2016, I was partying with my friends and my boyfriend. Two of my friends, let's call them J, girl, and D, boy, were there with us. They had been together for a few months, but D had already done some messed up things. As the party was winding down, I was standing outside with my boyfriend when I heard J and D arguing. I heard D accuse J of flirting with my boyfriend all night, which made me furious. J was one of my closest friends and hadn't done anything wrong. I went over and told D to shut up and act normal. The next thing I knew, I got slammed into the concrete driveway we were standing on. D ran off, and I didn't see him again for 7 months. I also didn't see J again, but that's another story. Story 59. New Year's Eve, I'd say it was 2013, I went to a party my brother was throwing. A new guy we had just met was hanging out with us. My brother's then girlfriend had invited some work friends, one of whom moonlighted as an exotic dancer. Our new friend, Donnie, was a bigger guy who looked like an overweight Jason Aldean with a thick Western Kentucky accent. He walked up to the dancer friend and said, "Hey girl, give me some kisses." Somehow it worked, and they headed to the house to find the one guest room. Meanwhile, her ex had been dragged to the party by her best friend, and the shades to the guest bedroom were open. People were snacking and watching Donnie get a blowy from this stranger until he couldn't get it up. The crowd started clapping and groaning, and the couple realized they could be seen. She tried to close the blinds, but with no real motor control, she failed. That's when Donnie decided on a backup plan. He went wrist deep, and everyone stopped watching at that point. Later, I was drinking and playing some games when the ex and her best friend approached me. They told me she had no one to kiss for New Year's. So, when the ball dropped, we kissed and made out for a bit. But then, she snapped out of it, ran off, and I never saw her again. I found out later she had gone back to her old ex before Donnie, who had to work that night, so I was essentially the backup choice. Story 60. 2 years ago, I hosted a New Year's Eve party with about 50 people. Most of them planned on staying over and had brought sleeping bags, pillows, etc. We'd all done this summer marching band thing where we slept on gym floors, so it wasn't unusual for us. Around 3 a.m., in my living room, surrounded by a dozen sleeping people, a guy stood up, whipped his dong out, and pissed all over my floor before stumbling into the bathroom to vomit. People had to move all their belongings out of the way of the expanding pool of pee. This wasn't just a little sprinkle. It was a full-on, just had a lot to drink piss from start to finish. I had to clean it all up. When I woke up the next morning, I discovered this loser had somehow stumbled into my bed with me. Story 61. I was queuing outside a huge rave with a friend in the rain around 11:40 on New Year's Eve. We were pretty close to the front, but people behind us were understandably getting frustrated about potentially still being outside at midnight despite paying a lot for tickets. The crowd started shoving and surging, forcing us forward into the metal fencing. It was pretty scary. We made it through to the first stage of security and admission around 11:50, and right then the pushing and shoving got so intense that the fences were knocked over, security was rushed, and hundreds of people flooded into the venue. Story 62. There was one emotionally unstable guy who got way too drunk and ruined the night for everyone. He had recently been fired from his job and kept complaining about possibly becoming homeless again. No one really knew why he'd been fired. Through his eyes, he was always the victim, but we did have some sympathy since he'd struggled with a dysfunctional family and bouts of homelessness. I brought the only girls to the party and he systematically tried to kiss each of them, getting shut down every time. They barely knew him. Their only interaction had been him complaining about the time he got MRSA and almost died. Eventually, he tried to kiss me, even though he had previously told me he hated me after I canceled plans because of car trouble. When I turned him down, he called me a two-faced whore, went into the corner, and continued drinking. Sometime after midnight, he walked out from the kitchen holding a knife to his neck, yelling things like, "I don't know what I'm capable of." People who had known him the longest tried to calm him down. "You are not my friends," he screamed. He finally put the knife down and started hysterically sobbing. My female friends were freaked out and we left. After that night, he ended up with no friends. We pitied him, but we couldn't really help someone who kept lashing out and blaming others for his problems. He moved in with his aunt in another state, and no one talks to him anymore. Story 63. My friend, who I'd been on the outs with for over a decade but used to be my best friend in high school, and with whom I still share mutual friends, got really drunk one night. She started arguing with someone, then broke down crying because she came to the conclusion that Democrats and liberals were somehow preventing her from having a baby. Yeah, I know either. Story 64. I was at my first New Year's Eve party last year. Some of us went over to a classmate's house. It started out nice and slow. They were cooking dinner for everyone, and we were drinking and hanging out. After finishing the meal, my friend's dad started blaming him for his girlfriend. And then he and his dad got into a huge brawl. They fought for about 2 hours, breaking things all over the house. My friend's sister was terrified. His girlfriend blacked out, and it almost ended with a police call, but they stopped around 3 a.m. And this wasn't even a big party. Only about 10 people were there. Story 65. More funny than truly messed up. I used to live in a group home for about a year, kind of like an orphanage for foster kids who couldn't find a placement. On New Year's Eve 2012, half the kids were outside and half were inside. The staff got the inside group together for a little prank on the ones outside. We all changed clothes, covered them in washable red dye, and laid them out in the main room. Then, we hid behind the staff counter and watched the horror on the monitors when the rest of the kids came in. Story 66. I had a party at my apartment. It was going great. I was a senior in college and had just graduated a semester early. I had a bottle of decent, but not amazing, champagne my cousin had given me for graduation, and I was just carrying it around, taking drinks from it. We probably had 30 to 40 people there when someone came to the door. It was a guy I didn't know. Apparently, someone from the party had accidentally gone to his apartment earlier. When they realized the mistake, they left. But this guy was convinced they had stolen something. Specifically, he was convinced they had stolen the bottle of champagne I was currently drinking. So I was standing in my doorway, listening to this ridiculous story, and I told the guy to leave. Nobody had stolen any champagne, and he was being absurd. He actually reached out and grabbed the bottle, but there was no way I was letting some random dude come into my apartment and take my stuff, so I held on tight. By this point, I was really mad and knew he was full of it. I started taunting him, asking what the hell he thought he was going to do. Was he going to hit a girl? Ready to go to jail over a $20 bottle of champagne? He didn't back down, and neither did I. Normally, I'm very non-confrontational, but seriously, this guy comes into my apartment, ruins my night, and tries to take my graduation gift? No way. After about 20 minutes of us both refusing to let go of the bottle, standing in the doorway, one of my friends went and got 2 of my hometown buddies who happened to be at the party. I grew up in a small Texas town, and these guys were huge. People you definitely wouldn't want to mess with. The moment the guy saw them backing me up, he let go of the bottle and ran off. Not before my roommate, an average-sized dude who was furious when he heard what happened, got up close to his face and told him never to set foot near our place again. Once it was over, I got hit with a rush of adrenaline. I realized that guy could have seriously hurt me, or a massive fight could have broken out. I sat on the couch holding my now warm bottle of champagne and broke down in tears. I think I finally got over it by midnight. Story 67. This whole setup was a bad idea from the start. We had a neighborhood New Year's Eve party around 7 p.m. so the kids could have fun without staying up too late. No fireworks were allowed because the HOA said it would be dangerous with everyone in the street, and the street was blocked off since we live in a cul-de-sac. The adults were drinking soda and a few beers, having a good time overall. Nothing major had happened until the affluent neighbor came out with a bunch of champagne bottles. Each bottle had to be popped open, so he passed them to a few of the men in the area. Everyone was happy, passing out solo cups, and the bottles started popping. Well, one of the neighbors had PTSD from Iraq. He normally stays inside for New Year's Eve because of fireworks, but since the HOA promised none, he came out. The popping bottles triggered him, and he broke down. At first, no one realized what was happening and thought he might be drunk, but his wife had to bring him into their house and explain the situation. I don't remember exactly what happened afterward, but the next year, anyone who wanted fireworks went to the park or a local church that held shows. Story 68. I was at a party when a guy I worked with, but had never seen outside the office, walked in. Apparently, we had a couple of mutual friends. He got ripped on shots and something else, I'm not sure what. He kept disappearing into the bathroom with another guy. Before 11:45, he soloed on the couch. Within minutes, he had explosive diarrhea all over the couch, the floor, and anyone who didn't move away in time. I went home. He called in sick the next workday and then quit. I never heard from him again. Story 69. Typical party with drinking. So typical drunk people. My girlfriend and I stayed sober since we were driving between a few different parties. Back at the drunk people's party, a guy and a girl were hosting at their house, and both got completely plastered. The girl passed out in the bathroom. She was heavy, so it was hard to lift her, but a few of us dragged her out and got her to a safe area. Her co-host boyfriend did not help because he was occupied. What was he doing? Playing some kind of game with other guests at a heavy wooden table? At some point, he and another guest started wrestling or fighting. People and objects went flying, and somehow the co-host ended up with a badly bleeding ear. By the time I got back after moving his girlfriend, the bathroom was finally free for everyone else, the co-host boyfriend, drunk and Angry about his bloody ear, completely lost it. He went and grabbed his AR-15 rifle, locked and loaded it with a full magazine, and focused his rage on one specific person he thought had cut him. He was way too drunk to reason with. My girlfriend took the targeted guy for a car ride to get him out of the danger zone. The co-host refused to put the rifle down and would not listen to anyone. For some reason, though, he trusted me. Oh joy. I convinced him that we needed to team up to go after the guy who had wronged him, and also that he was too drunk to shoot straight. Eventually, he handed the rifle over to me. I passed it to someone behind me, and it was locked away. Tempers eased. My girlfriend brought the targeted guy back to the party. While they were gone, she had given him a bit of a counseling session about some problems in his life. Things turned out good. Very good. Earlier that night, I had asked my girlfriend to marry me. Diamond ring, roses, that sort of proposal. She said yes. We got married almost 2 years later, and we recently celebrated our 23-year wedding anniversary. We do not do much for New Year's Eve anymore. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.